There continues to be an ongoing flow of news regarding Tesla and the progress of full self-driving. Red hot right after Elon's visit in China, where he obtained preliminary approval for FSD there, we're now hearing rumors that Korea is preparing for allowing FSD as well. We're seeing screenshots of the Tesla app with the changes. And Elon himself said that FSD is now ready for left-hand drive countries and right-hand drive is coming later. Today, we'll watch a video from last year Elon himself just shared where he talked about the value of robotaxi. And another Elon news, he also explains why he picked August 8th, as a date for the reveal. There are signs that China could be one of the first to also be offering Tesla robotaxi services. So I've got Hans Nelson joining us, and he's going to help us take this apart and see what's happening with full self-driving. Very exciting, Hans. He has his own YouTube channel called Hans C. Nelson. Thank you for joining me, Hans.
Thanks for having me, Herbert.
So many news, or quite a bit of news coming out about Tesla and specifically FSD. So the last few days has been whirlwind, of course, but there continues to be more and more. So here's, 12.3.6 is rolling out now to not only employees, but to folks. I actually got it already. So again, just the pace of improvements. These are dot releases, .3, .4, .5, .6, and then pretty soon we're going to get 12.4 and we're going to get 12.5. But it's just great to see the progress. So this rumor came out that in Korea, the Tesla app software, the upgrade tab has been changed to include the FSD driving image. So there's rumors that preparations for the introduction of FSD are currently underway in Korea. This is a person who showed before and after of the screenshots of his app. So before, you'll see that this is the visual here, and then the after, you can see that it looks exactly what you would see if it's full self-driving. Here's the before, here's the after, okay? So Alex Voigt says, is this the fourth country? So right, there's US, there's Canada. Now we're hearing that China's approving it. Could Korea also approve it next? That will regulate and allow FSD near soon. And he says, South Korea is not a member of UNECE, so they could just go for it. What's your thoughts on all this, Hans?
Yeah, I definitely think that, China's going to be very, very high on the priority list to get it out there as soon as possible. And I think that the regulatory environment in China is probably going to be very accommodating. I think this is technology that they want because they know it's going to be good for their economy overall. And right now they desperately need whatever they can get. And then I think, Korea does make a lot of sense as a second, just for the exact points that, Alex mentioned there. The fact that it doesn't have a lot of the overhead of regulation that comes from UNECE helps them to be able to move a little bit faster on this. And, I don't know from an economics priorities standpoint how important this feels to government officials there in Korea. But it definitely makes sense that it will be, there will be jurisdictions that operate like this, that just decide to take matters into their own hands, move quickly, and allow this technology to be implemented and to progress, because it is something that can be beneficial.
Yeah. So the UNECE is a member state. It looks like that they have 56 member states, which includes non-European members. And this was a economic commission put together to facilitate, economy, and transportation is one of them. And so it includes the U.S. and even Russia.
And by facilitate,
Turkey.
they mean stop dead in its tracks.
Yeah, Turkey and all that, and Korea is part of it. Or Korea is not part of it, so that means they don't have, right? They don't have to wait for that. The other bit was Elon actually said a few days ago, last week, he said, we believe version 12 is ready for supervised FSD in left-hand drive countries. He's referring to the countries where the steering wheel is on the left-hand side and they drive on the right-hand side of the road. So all right, right-hand drive will take a bit, and Korea is, the steering wheel is on the left-hand drive. So probably good news, right? The other bit was Elon just tweeted this out. He just, this obviously was something that Elon News and Interviews posted, and he liked it enough. But instead of just liking it or reposting it, he actually downloaded the video and reposted the video itself. Let's watch it. It's him at last year's shareholder day talking about the value of robotaxis. So I think it's worthwhile for us to listen in again.
To appreciate is it's not that full self-driving will be as good as a person. It will be much, much better. like a lot, like over time, 10 times more, 10 times safer than a person. It's not even going to be a contest, frankly. So this is a really big deal. And I think some people realize it. I think you guys probably realize it, but being able to do a software update and have several million cars suddenly go from manual driving to autonomous, I think will be the single biggest asset value increase in history. The normal usage of a passenger car is roughly 10 to 12 hours per week, call it maybe an hour and a half per day. And when you drive around, you see lots of cars just parked in parking lots because out of the 168 hours in a week, they're using less than 10%, maybe 7% of the hours of the week a car is in use. But once it is autonomous, it can be used probably, I don't know, 50 hours a week, maybe more. So it is effectively a 5-fold increase in the value of a car overnight. I'm actually surprised that so few people realize this, or maybe they just don't believe it's real, but it is. So this is really an insanely big deal.
So few people realize this. Maybe they don't believe it, but we're starting to see signs that people are starting to really start believing it. Finally, what's your thoughts on what he said?
Yeah, I just like to listen to the way that Elon thinks. This is one of those things where he's explaining his first principles reasoning on the scenario, and him saying that it can be roughly 5 times more valuable than it is today. Like, that's not saying that we're going to, like, it is going to be this overnight flip of a switch and that is all going to be realized at the exact same time. But this is basically the way he thinks about things, what he calls in the limit, where he goes to the most extreme case of what could be possible if you had a magic wand and thinks about it there. And that helps him clarify how to make decisions in the short term. And what he said is spot on, that, we do have all these cars that for the most part, they just sit around and do nothing. And if there were more of those cars that were sitting around doing nothing on the road instead of in parking lots, then you would need fewer cars overall because the utilization of your fleet is so low. And this is the economic opportunity that Tesla is pursuing. And I think that, it'll take us some time to get from where we are today to where he's talking about. And I don't know, how long that amount of time is. But if we can even make a small dent in that opportunity, that's a big win for investors, and it's a big win for people and for just the efficiency of the resources that we use.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about the big events that happened, obviously, in the last several days with Elon visiting China. And we're hearing now that it's preliminary approval for FSD. And there's some rumors that on 8/8, and Elon actually replied and said why he chose 8/8. So let's take a look at this. Whether or not they're going to roll out robotaxi in China earlier, later, we'll talk about it. And then I do have a lot of questions I want to ask your opinion on about, what does this all mean? About what's the value of what happened? So here is this guy named Michelle. I won't say his last name. He said, when Elon Musk announced that Tesla would organize a robotaxi event on August 8th, i.e. 8/8, which is a lucky number in China, very lucky, it's repeated, that was already quite a hint. But with yesterday's FSD green light given by Chinese authorities and the Baidu deal, which is the maps, I guess there's probably little doubt the Tesla robotaxi story should start in China. That's what he said, right? So likely on August 8th, they'll make an announcement. There's been a number of signals, right? Even Grace Tao, vice president in China for Tesla, she also made an announcement talking about robotaxi and saying that things will be revealed on August 8th. So there's some, hints. But Elon himself replied to that post and said, I did partly pick it because 8/8 is a lucky number in China. Also the birthday of my triplets, who are now 17. So he's not confirming that the robotaxi is coming to China or not. It's hard to understand what he meant by it, but I did partly pick it because 8/8 is a lucky number in China. So just partly pick it. What's your thoughts? How likely is this? And then let me just finish this off. This guy says, my theory, robotaxi launches in China first without the US roadblock and politics. Now it's going to make the US look bad. It's going to put pressure on US government to accelerate their approval. 8 and Year of the Dragon is a very Chinese thing. 8 is prosperous, rich, and Chinese. That's enough hint already. Yeah. So what's your thoughts on what's the likelihood that this is actually what's going to happen?
I would be pretty surprised if it rolled out in China before it rolled out somewhere in the United States. And that's the thing that I think some people forget and miss, is that the United States is a collection of states that all have their own ability to regulate things. And so we don't do things all as a country on a lot of different issues. So if you look at it as, will it be available in the whole country in the US before it's available in, roughly the whole country of China? There's a probably likely argument that China actually could beat the US to having it widely accessible across the majority of the country. But I think it will actually come to some jurisdictions here in the United States first before, and that's really for some practical reasons. And yeah, I would just say that personally, my opinion is that it will be launched as a Tesla owned and operated service somewhere where Elon has a large number of engineers. So that would either be San Francisco
Yeah.
or Austin, depending on which one it's easier to get through all that regulatory hurdle. And the nice thing about San Francisco is they've already kind of got a framework that allows Cruise and Waymo to operate there, and so all Tesla has to do is kind of follow their footsteps on that. And then Austin, I think that it wouldn't surprise me if our governor just kind of rolls out the red carpet and says, "Hey, y'all do whatever you want. Like, we're
Mhm.
not saying you can't do anything specific." Um, and I know that there are going to be a number of states that really take that approach. Just have at it, do what you want, and that I would think would probably get launched before China for both of those reasons. Like, I think the regulations are going to make it possible in certain states for that to happen early on. And then I
Yeah.
think the engineering talent here is going to be a big part of it, because one of the challenges that they're going to have in China is that while they can probably train up a general world model, I don't think that the Chinese government is going to be super comfortable with the US taking a bunch of data from China to then train here in data centers here in the United States, a model that then goes back to China. I think all of that needs to kind of happen there. And so my guess on how this is going to work from a
Mm.
technical model standpoint is that they're going to take a working version of the United States model, ship it over to a data center in China, and then do a whole bunch of reinforcement learning on local Chinese data that's added to the training set to
Mhm.
fine tune that model there in China. And so basically, all that to say, because I don't think they're going to have a data center in China that's big enough to train a model from scratch in China. I think that the Chinese system is going to be behind the US system because it's always going to be based
Mhm.
on a base model that is developed here in the United States, and then adapted
Yeah.
to Chinese roads.
Yeah, it makes no sense that a robotaxi will launch first in China. Well, I guess the only one it makes sense is that, just as you said, the government can easily just say, "We're going to do it. We allow you to do it," and then they can just turn on the switch and everybody does
Yeah,
it. But Tesla's not yet tested FSD in China at all, and now they're getting a approval for it. It'll take them a while to feel like they can actually launch robotaxi. On August 8th, they might announce it and say, "Yeah, we're planning to do robotaxi here," but it's unlikely. And then you said that which is actually right in line with my thinking. There's a debate that I've been having with Alexandra and other people. I think that it's going to be Tesla owned vehicles when they first launch it. So you said,
I
yeah,
agree.
cities like Austin, cities like San Francisco, Tesla owned vehicles, whether it's the Model 3, Model S, or if it's the Robotaxi, which won't be available for a couple of years. So
Yeah.
it's most likely they're Tesla owned vehicles. They're not going to roll it out. Alexandra thinks it's going to be both Tesla owned vehicles, and Tesla owners can put it into the Robotaxi network. I just think there's just too much complication in terms of, what all the things you need to do. Okay. So with this thing that happened in China in the last several days, does this, in your mind, does this does this not open it up for all the concerns about regulatory? Because a lot of the concerns, because if China says we're allowing you to do FSD here and they're like showing signs they're going to allow robotaxi, how's the US going to say, nope, we're not going to do it? I mean, of course they could, but it would be a real issue, a real, a sad thing that would happen because they would fall behind. And I think the Chinese are doing this, right? Because they want to support, they realized, right, that it's not only the revolution to electric vehicles, but you need to become autonomous. And if they can give their automakers the autonomous capability, then they will succeed selling it globally. So that's question one, regulation. Question two is licensing. I mean, I'm expecting lots of Chinese companies lining up and announcing it soon.
I hadn't really thought about Chinese companies licensing the FSD software a whole lot. I wouldn't be surprised to see it. The one caveat in that scenario to think about is just that I know that Chinese Communist Party is going to want to have proprietary, or not proprietary, but they're going to want to have systems that can do that task that they kind of own top to bottom. I think that they will continue to fund basically a catch-up version of Tesla's FSD, and maybe they'll do that at the same time that they have some that will license so that they can bring the technology sooner, and then continue to pour money into their own homegrown version as well. But I don't think that long term that China wants to be dependent on a U.S. owned company or a technology that they view as strategically important.
They might not have a choice. You
might
and I
not.
have shared, we've looked at this and studied it quite a bit, and people think that there's competitors out there, but they're not, because they're using LiDAR and they're not yet switched to neural nets. They need to, they're very far behind. And if it truly does take this much data, so okay, you haven't given it a lot of thought. I think that there's going to be lots of announcements of Chinese car companies partnering with Tesla for licensing the FSD. I think it's going to be BYD. Now that the government in China has given the green light, they've said, okay, they've met it, we're fine. And then what's your thoughts on regulations then? Do you think that this would speed up regulations around the world now that you saw that China is deciding to move forward?
I do think that it will have a very positive effect. I don't know that it's going to move fast, but it will definitely accelerate. The more vehicles that are on the road that are operating safely, the less of an argument there can be that this is not something that a particular country should bring to their own people. And so if you have the Chinese government getting on board, and then I would say we're going to have, it's going to be operating in portions of the US. So if we at least have portions of the US and then support from the Chinese government, the whole rest of the world kind of looks to one or the other as leaders. And I think that that's something that it's not going to affect everything all over the
Right.
world at the same time
But it's gonna
overnight,
get
but it's going to push things in that direction and accelerate things. And like I said, the further, the more vehicles that are on the road that operate safely, the harder it is to make an argument that we shouldn't have this.
What's your thoughts on data? You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. So one of the big wins possibly, right, is because now that they've expanded to China, the FSD driven miles is going to just increase. So not only the FSD kind of revenue for Tesla, right, but the data. And so the data, Elon has said that they estimated, this was years ago, so I don't know if this is even real anymore, but he said that, at 6 billion miles of FSD driven, and they announced recently that they've already hit 1 billion, then it'll become so to the point that they can get worldwide regulatory approval at that point, because that at 6 billion miles driven FSD, they'll be able to prove that it's 10 times safer than a human at that point. And they'll be able to get the data needed to hit the edge cases and then also to prove it unequivocally. Do you think that this is going to help with that?
Yes, they can use the statistics on safety, definitely. I don't know that Chinese data is going to be able to benefit the rest of the world specifically, other than the knowledge of how to use the data to train a model. But I don't think that it's necessary for the Chinese data. And the reason I say that is because I think that the Chinese Communist Party is going to be very protective of the data that is
Mm,
generated in China, and they're not going to want it to
mhm.
be basically taken outside the country. But there's many, many vehicles that are exported. Like, there's still lots of other countries around that we can start collecting data from, even if it's just in shadow mode, that we can generate data in other places and then use the learnings that we have developed here in the United States and in China in how to turn the data into a functional system, to accelerate things. So, really, six of one, half a dozen of the other. We're getting there very fast. Like, it whether we can or cannot use the data from China to impact the rest of the world, I think makes a very small couple of percent difference in the overall timeline of when this is accessible to everyone.
Okay. Well, I think it's obviously good news. China has announced or about to announce formal approval of FSD, but they've already given kind of their backing for it. Now you're hearing Korea doing it. You're going to hear many countries now. Australia probably next, and Europe, of course, is already heading this direction. And so it's we're going to see more and more countries saying that Tesla can do FSD there. Again, honestly, if you think about it, China's like it's like the place that is they would have been more likely to have been the one that said no because of all things you said, Chinese competition. But for them to say yes for Tesla, that means that Chinese competition is either not there or they feel like they can learn, just like they did with car building from
I think
Tesla.
it's just understanding their priorities. Like, their priorities are to be a leader
Yeah.
in next generation transportation and a leader in artificial intelligence. And if Tesla is basically unequivocally the leader in those two things, then they have to facilitate Tesla bringing whatever it is that they have into China. And
Yeah.
that's what we've seen from them. That's the reason that Elon got the wholly owned factory in China in the first place. And that's going to be the same reason. Like, the
Yeah.
existing set of decisions that have been made to get us to this point are underpinned by the exact same reasoning that's going to continue to allow Tesla to operate in China for the foreseeable future.
And we have to say, we got to be so lucky to have Elon Musk. I don't know of another person in the world who can go around shaking hands with the top leaders of every country, welcoming him there. Of course, we've already made comments in the past about recently in other shows how it's sad the government here in the United States is not doing the same thing. But, to be able to do this, he single handedly, is able to do these kind of things. And then I do think that there's going to be partnerships. Just gonna it's gonna
Yep.
happen now. He said that there will be a partnership coming soon, maybe the end of this year, maybe two even. And now with this, I think it's
Yep.
just they're making phone calls at this point.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hans. Appreciate it. Follow him on his YouTube channel. Check him out there. He's just starting to produce more and more shows, very deep dives. He had James Dalma there recently, so check him out there. Hans C. Nelson on YouTube. Thanks, Hans. Bye bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.